I left my land alone for 5 years. When I came back, there was a house on it. Not a shed, not a fence, a whole damn house. I thought she'd apologize. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and fined me for trespassing on my own land. I didn't buy this land to flip it. I didn't buy it to build a development, and I sure as hell didn't buy it to join an HOA. I bought it because I wanted quiet. 5 years ago, I was done. Done with cities telling me how high my grass could be. Done with neighbors who measured their lives in complaints. Done with rules written by people who didn't own an inch of dirt themselves. So, I did what a lot of men my age eventually do. I cashed out, packed light, and bought a piece of land far enough out that nobody cared what color my roof was. 20-some acres, raw land, no HOA, no shared fences. No one close enough to hear me sneeze. That mattered to me. Before I ever signed the paperwork, I checked everything. The deed, the survey, the parcel boundaries. I even walked the perimeter myself with a GPS unit just to be sure. Old habits die hard. The land was clean, outside any HOA jurisdiction, recorded properly with the county, clear lines, no easements, no shared access. I didn't rush the place. I fixed it up slowly, made it livable, made it mine. And when life pulled me away, when family obligations and work made it impossible to stay, I didn't abandon it. I prepared it. Before I left, I did 3 important things. First, I set my property taxes to auto-pay. Every year. On time, no exceptions. That matters more than people realize. Because in this country, land isn't claimed by who shouts the loudest. It's claimed by paperwork, receipts, and patience. Second, I kept insurance active and my mailing address current. The county always knew where to find me. There was never a question of ownership. And third, more out of habit than paranoia, I installed 2 solar-powered trail cameras on the property. They weren't fancy. No flashing lights, no visible mounts, just quiet little units strapped high in the trees, angled toward the access points. I'd spent enough years around land disputes to know one thing. When land sits empty, people get curious. And curiosity has a way of crossing lines. I didn't expect trouble, but I didn't leave blind either. For 5 years, the land sat exactly the way I left it. I checked in when I could, paid what needed paying, let it be. To me, that land wasn't vacant. It was waiting. So, when I finally came back, when the dust on the road felt familiar again, when the horizon opened up the way it always had, I expected to unlock my door, sweep out some cobwebs, and settle back into the quiet I'd paid for. What I didn't expect was a house, not a trailer, not a storage shed, not a temporary structure, a full-sized modern home, concrete foundation, finished exterior, sitting exactly where empty ground was supposed to be. And standing next to it was a woman looking at me like I was the intruder. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. And this definitely wasn't temporary. Someone had made a decision while I was gone, a deliberate one. I hadn't even turned off the engine, and she was already rewriting my boundaries. I sat there for a moment with the engine still running. Dust drifted past the hood like nothing had changed. The same wind, the same wide sky, the same quiet I remembered. Except it wasn't quiet anymore. I shut off the engine and stepped out of the truck. The door closed with a familiar thud, the kind of sound you only hear when there's nothing around to swallow it. I didn't walk toward the house right away. I stood there instead, taking it in. It was newer than anything within miles. Clean lines, fresh stucco, landscaping that hadn't existed before, gravel beds, trimmed shrubs, a paved drive that cut straight through what used to be open ground. I knew that ground. I'd walked it, measured it, marked it with my own hands. I pulled my phone out and opened the GPS app, more out of instinct than doubt. The dot blinked once, then settled, right where I thought it would. I looked up again at the house, still there. That's when the woman spoke. "You can't park there." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had the kind of confidence that assumes agreement before it finishes the sentence. I turned slowly. She was standing near the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on, mid-50s maybe, hair cut short and sprayed into place. Everything about her posture said she wasn't surprised to see me. If anything, she looked prepared. "I'm just stopping by my place," I said. She shook her head once, like a teacher correcting a student. No, you're not. I glanced back at the truck, then at the house, then at her again. This is my land, I said. Not raised, not aggressive, just a statement. She smiled, not warmly. More like someone humoring a child. This is Sun Mesa Estates, she said. You're on HOA property. There it was. HOA. I hadn't heard that acronym in years, and I didn't miss it. I think you're mistaken, I said. This parcel isn't part of any HOA. She laughed softly, a practiced sound. It is now. I didn't argue. I didn't pull out paperwork. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I walked a few steps toward the old oak tree near the drive. The one I remembered because it leaned slightly to the east, roots half exposed from years of wind. I pointed at it. That tree, I said. That's the eastern marker. She followed my finger, then shrugged. The boundaries were updated while you were gone. That sentence landed heavier than she probably realized. Updated how? I asked. Survey adjustments, she said. Community alignment. It happens. I turned back to her. By who? She hesitated for half a second, just long enough to notice. The county, she said. You must have missed the notices. I hadn't. I kept every notice, every receipt, every statement, but I didn't say that yet. Instead, I asked the question that mattered. And the house, I said, when was it built? Her smile tightened. About 3 years ago, right in the middle of my absence. I nodded slowly. So, someone built a permanent structure, I said, on land that wasn't theirs. She sighed, like she was running out of patience. You really should talk to the HOA, she said. This doesn't need to get complicated. I finally looked her straight in the eye. It already is. She took off her sunglasses. That's when I saw it. Not confusion, not concern, calculation. She wasn't worried about being wrong. She was worried about being challenged. My name is Karen, she said. I'm the HOA president. And if you plan on staying here, you'll need to follow community rules like everyone else. I let the silence sit. Then I said, I don't belong to your community. She stepped closer. Then you'll need to, she said. Or we'll have to address the violations. Violations? I asked. She gestured vaguely toward my truck, toward the land, toward everything. Unauthorized access, she said. Trespassing, non-compliance. I almost laughed. Instead, I took one last look at the house, at the concrete, at the driveway cutting through my dirt. And I realized something else. This wasn't a misunderstanding I could clear up with a conversation. This was a claim, and claims only go one of two ways. You back down, or you prove them wrong. I told her I'd be in touch. She nodded, already turning away, as if the matter was settled. I didn't leave right away. Not because I wanted a confrontation, but because I wanted to understand the shape of the lie. Karen turned and started walking back toward the house, like the conversation was already over, like she'd decided the ending without asking who else might be in the story. I followed at a respectful distance, not close enough to provoke, not far enough to disengage. Right, I said. You're the HOA president. She stopped, slowly turned, smiled again. Yes, she said. I am. There it was, the title, the shield she hid behind. She motioned toward the driveway and began talking like a tour guide. Sun Mesa Estates expanded a few years back, she said. The community needed consistency, oversight, standards. Standards for who? I asked. For everyone, she replied, without hesitation. That's how communities work. I watched her carefully as she spoke, confident, rehearsed, not defensive. This wasn't her first boundary dispute. It wasn't even her first conversation like this. She rattled off rules the way people do when they've said them enough times to stop hearing pushback. Approved paint colors, fence heights, roof materials, quiet hours. Then she said the word that told me exactly where this was going. Dues. I stopped walking. How much? I asked. She named a number, then another, monthly dues, special assessments. And then she added the part she'd been waiting for, back payments. I looked at her. How far back? I asked. 5 years, she said, plus penalties. I let out a short laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I wasn't here, I said. She tilted her head slightly, the way people do when they think they're being generous. The obligation remains, she said. I asked her to explain how that made sense. She sighed, already tired of me. You were absent, she said. The community moved forward. We updated boundaries, added infrastructure, raised property values. By building on my land, I said. She didn't deny it. Instead, she reframed it. The land was unused, she said, unmaintained, vacant. It wasn't vacant, I said. It was owned. She smiled again. Ownership is complicated. That was the moment I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded deed. I didn't hand it to her. I didn't wave it around. I just let her see it. Ownership isn't complicated, I said. It's written down. She glanced at the paper and waved it away like it was irrelevant. That document is outdated, she said. We're working with updated surveys now. Who's we? I asked. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. The association, she said. And the county. I made a mental note of that answer. She took a step closer. Let's be practical, she said. You have two options. I waited. Option 1, she said. You join the HOA. Bring your property into compliance. Pay the outstanding dues. We move on. And option 2, I asked. Her smile disappeared. Option 2, she said. We escalate. Escalate how? I asked. Fines, she said. Enforcement actions. Legal proceedings. For what? I asked. She gestured vaguely around us. Unauthorized access, she said. Trespassing. Non-compliance. I stared at her. You're telling me, I said slowly, that I'm trespassing on my own land. That's correct, she said, according to our records. I looked past her at the house again, at the concrete foundation, at the driveway carved into what used to be my dirt. That's when it clicked. She wasn't bluffing. She wasn't improvising. She believed the paperwork would protect her. She believed authority mattered more than truth. And she believed I would back down. I folded the deed and put it away. Send me whatever notices you think apply, I said. She nodded. You'll hear from us. I turned back toward my truck. As I walked away, she called out one last thing. You don't want to make this difficult. I didn't turn around. I didn't come back to make it easy, I said. The notice arrived 3 days later, not by email, not with a phone call, by certified mail, the kind that requires a signature, like it's doing you a favor by proving it exists. I stood at the kitchen counter and opened it slowly. Thick paper, official letterhead. The HOA logo printed in muted beige, like everything else they approved. Sun Mesa Estates Homeowners Association. Official notice of violation. I read it once, then again. According to the letter, my property was now considered part of the Sun Mesa community. According to the letter, I was in violation of multiple community standards, unauthorized access, failure to maintain community aesthetic, non-compliant driveway materials, unapproved vehicle parking, and then the part they'd clearly been waiting to deliver, outstanding dues, 5 years, plus late penalties, plus administrative fees. The total sat at the bottom of the page like a dare. I set the letter down and let the room go quiet. I wasn't angry yet. I was curious. Because attached to the notice was a single-page diagram, a map, printed in color, neatly labeled, and wrong. At first glance, it looked close enough to pass. Parcel lines, lot numbers, scale bar. But the eastern boundary, the one nearest Karen's house, was shifted. Not much. 30, maybe 40 feet. Just enough. I pulled my original survey from the folder I kept for things exactly like this, laid it on the counter next to the HOA map. The difference was subtle, but it was there. Their version crept inward, mine didn't. I felt something tighten behind my eyes. Mistakes happen, I've seen plenty of them. But mistakes don't usually benefit one specific house so precisely. I read the letter again, slower this time. The language was careful, confident, written to sound inevitable. It didn't ask me to respond. It instructed me to comply. 30 days to join the HOA. 30 days to bring my property into compliance. 30 days to remit payment. Failure to do so would result in escalation. I smiled at that word. Escalation. I flipped the page and found the signature block. Karen Riggs, HOA president. Printed, not signed. That told me something too. I poured a cup of coffee and sat down at the table with both maps in front of me. I thought about what she'd said, about boundaries being updated, about the county being involved. And I thought about what she hadn't said. There was no permit number listed anywhere in the packet, no reference to a recorded easement, no documentation of a boundary agreement, just authority. Assumed authority. I made a short list on a legal pad. County records, tax assessor, survey history, permits. And one more thing. I went out to the truck and grabbed the small lockbox from behind the seat. Inside it was the memory card from one of the trail cameras. I hadn't checked it yet. I hadn't needed to. But now, holding that letter in my hand, I realized something. This wasn't a misunderstanding they were trying to fix. This was a narrative they were trying to lock in. And narratives fall apart when they're forced to face facts. I slid the HOA letter back into its envelope and set it aside. I didn't call Karen. I didn't email the HOA. I didn't respond at all. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the county's database. If someone had moved my boundary, I wanted to know who gave them the pen. I didn't start with accusations. I started with records. County records don't lie, but they do remember. And when something doesn't match, it leaves a trail. I logged into the assessor's database first. Parcel number, owner name, tax history. Everything checked out. My name was still there. The acreage hadn't changed. The tax payments were current. Every single year. No red flags. Next, I pulled the recorded plats. The ones filed years ago. The ones nobody bothers to look at unless there's trouble. I opened the most recent one, zoomed in, then opened the previous version side by side. The boundary lines were identical. I leaned back in my chair and let that sink in. If the county's official record hadn't changed, then Karen's map wasn't an update. It was an invention. I dug deeper. Permits were next. I searched by address first, then by parcel number, then by adjacent lots. Karen's house had permits, plumbing, electrical, structural, but something was missing. There was no permit for an expansion near the eastern boundary, no variance, no encroachment notice, no recorded easement. The foundation footprint on the permit drawings didn't match what I'd seen in person. Not by much, but enough. I opened the permit PDFs and zoomed in on the corner coordinates, compared them to the county GIS overlay. That's when I saw it. The permit drawings were based on a boundary file that didn't exist in the county's system anymore. I checked the metadata. Created 6 years ago. Modified once, then abandoned. The name attached to the file caught my attention. A county planning technician I vaguely remembered from years back. Notorious for cutting corners, eventually transferred, then quietly removed from the department. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. This wasn't sloppiness. This was convenience. Someone had taken an old internal file, tweaked it just enough, and used it as a foundation for everything that came after. Not official enough to stand alone, but official enough to scare most people into compliance. I printed the plats, the permits, the GIS overlays, laid them out across the table. Karen's map sat in the middle like a bad forgery. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. The county never moved my boundary, the HOA never gained jurisdiction, and the house, at least part of it, never belonged where it was built. I wasn't done yet. I called the assessor's office the next morning. I didn't mention Karen. I didn't mention the HOA. I just asked a simple question. Has my parcel boundary changed in the last 10 years? The clerk didn't even hesitate. No, she said, not according to our records. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called the planning department. This time I asked about permits near my parcel, specifically expansions or variances along the eastern line. There was a pause on the other end. No variances, the planner said, and no recorded encroachments. I wrote that down. Finally, I asked the question I already knew the answer to. Would a private HOA have the authority to redraw parcel boundaries? The planner laughed. No, she said, absolutely not. That was it. The last doubt fell away. Karen hadn't misunderstood the boundary. She'd sidestepped it. She hadn't waited for approval. She'd worked around it. And she hadn't counted on one thing, that I'd come back with time, patience, and receipts. I gathered everything into a single folder and labeled it with the date, Then I pulled out my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a licensed surveyor, an old colleague, the kind of man who didn't guess. When he answered, I said, "I need you to take a look at something." He didn't ask why, he just said, "When?" I looked out the window toward the eastern boundary, where the land dipped just enough to hide what didn't belong there. "Soon," I said, "very soon." Because now I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Darren arrived just after sunrise. Same truck, same thermos, same quiet confidence he'd always had. He stepped out, took one look at the house near the eastern edge, and didn't say a word. That told me more than any greeting could. We didn't start with opinions. We started with measurements. Darren set up his equipment the way a man does when he's done this 1,000 times and plans to do it 1,000 more. Tripod, receiver, calibration check. He moved methodically, like the land itself was giving him instructions. I walked with him along the perimeter, pointing out the markers I remembered. The oak tree, the old fence post that never quite stood straight, the shallow dip where rainwater always collected in the spring. He nodded, logged coordinates, said nothing. Hours passed that way. Sun climbing, wind shifting, the kind of day where everything feels exposed. When the drone went up, I felt the weight of it settle in my chest. Not fear, anticipation. The drone traced the boundary lines precisely, stitching images together in real time. On Darren's tablet, the land began to assemble itself, layers of data aligning over something much simpler, reality. When he brought the drone down, Darren finally spoke. "Let's take a look," he said. We stood shoulder to shoulder as the overlays snapped into place. County GIS, recorded plat, current imagery, the lines matched perfectly, until they didn't. The eastern boundary, my boundary, cut cleanly through the corner of Karen's property. Not by inches, not by a foot, by a lot. The back portion of the garage, the patio, and a significant chunk of the sunroom, all sitting squarely on my land. Darren zoomed in, then out again, like he wanted to be absolutely certain. "There it is," he said, "clear as day." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He scrolled through elevation data next, confirmed grade changes, foundation footprint. "About 800 square feet," he said, "give or take." 800. That wasn't an accident, that was a decision. Darren leaned back and folded his arms. "No easement," he said, "no recorded agreement. No variance." He tapped the screen once more. "This shouldn't be here." Before he packed up, Darren did one last thing. He walked over to the corner of the patio, right where the concrete crossed my line. He set his gear down, reached into the truck, and came back with a sledgehammer and a bright neon orange survey stake. Without ceremony, he drove it into the dirt. Deep. Each strike echoed off the house. Metal on steel, steel on earth. The stake went in right beside her flower bed, standing tall and impossible to miss. It looked obscene against the manicured landscaping, like a warning shot frozen in place. Darren stepped back, wiped his hands, and nodded once. "Just so nobody misses it," he said. We spent the rest of the afternoon documenting everything. Still images, video passes, coordinate logs. By the time the sun started to drop, Darren had assembled a report that didn't argue. It stated, when he packed up for good, he handed me a flash drive. "Licensed, notarized," he said, "ready for court if it ever gets there." I thanked him and watched as he drove away, dust curling behind his tires. I stood there for a long time after that, looking at the house, at the concrete, at that bright orange stake standing where denial used to live. I thought about the letter, the map, the confidence in Karen's voice. I thought about how many people would have folded right there, paid the dues, signed the paperwork, moved the line in their heads because it was easier than fighting it on paper. That's what she was counting on. That night, I spread everything out on the kitchen table. My deed, the county plats, Darren's survey, the drone images, 4 versions of the same truth. Only one of them had been lying. I scanned the report and saved copies in 3 different places. Cloud storage, external drive, encrypted folder, old habits again. Then I did one more thing. I pulled the memory card from the trail camera. I hadn't looked at it yet. Not really. Up until now, I'd wanted the land to speak for itself. But now that it had, I was ready to hear the rest. As the files began to load, I realized something else. Karen hadn't just built too far. She hadn't just crossed a line, she'd built a story around it, and stories only survive as long as nobody checks the ground beneath them. I leaned back in my chair and waited for the footage to play. I didn't watch the footage right away. I poured a drink first. Not because I needed courage, because I needed patience. The orange stake was still there outside, catching the last light of the day. A physical line where a story had tried to replace the truth. I slid the memory card into the reader and waited for the folder to load. The files weren't dramatic at first. Wind-moving brush, a coyote at night, a truck passing on the road. Weeks of nothing. Then I scrolled back to the period when the house was being built. There she was. Karen stood near the edge of my land, phone pressed to her ear, pacing like someone rehearsing a speech. She pointed toward the open dirt where the patio now sat. I leaned forward. The audio crackled for a second, then settled. "He doesn't even know," she said. I paused the video, rewound it, played it again. "He still thinks the line's back there," she continued, waving her arm toward the oak tree. "Just adjust the layout like we planned. I'll handle the rest." The words sat in the room with me. Not speculation, not assumption, confirmation. I watched the clip all the way through. She wasn't alone. A man stood with her, work boots, rolled plans under his arm. A contractor, maybe. Someone who knew enough to ask questions and not enough to walk away. "I thought he filed something," the man said. Karen scoffed. "He won't," she said. "And even if he does, I'll say it was a survey error. It happens all the time." She stopped pacing and looked straight toward the tree, straight toward the camera. For a split second, I wondered if she could see it. Then she turned away. I let the clip run until she walked out of frame. The next file loaded automatically. A different day. Same spot. This time she wasn't on the phone. She was standing there with two men, pointing at wooden stakes already set in the ground. "Shift it," she said. "Just a few feet. Nobody measures twice." One of the men hesitated. "That's not what the map shows," he said. Karen's voice hardened. "That's the map we're using," she replied. I closed my eyes. This wasn't someone who misunderstood a boundary. This was someone who managed it. I sat there for a long time after the footage ended. The house outside felt heavier now, less like a structure, more like evidence. Karen hadn't built a house and hoped for forgiveness. She'd built a strategy. She assumed I wouldn't come back. And if I did, she assumed I'd be tired, confused, eager to make it go away. That's how these things usually end. A check written. A line quietly moved. A story rewritten without anyone noticing. I copied the files to a separate drive and labeled the folder with the date. Then I made a second copy, then a third. Old habits again. I didn't confront her. I didn't send an email. I didn't tip my hand. Instead, I went back to the kitchen table and lined everything up. The survey, the county plats, the drone images, and now the footage. 4 corners of the same truth. And in the center of it all was a woman who thought authority meant ownership. I glanced out the window again. The neon orange stake stood exactly where Darren had driven it, right beside her flower bed, bright, unavoidable. I wondered how long it would take before she noticed it, and what she'd do when she realized the line wasn't theoretical anymore. Because once a boundary stops being abstract, once it becomes visible, people stop pretending it can be moved. I shut down the laptop and picked up my phone. There was one more step before this went any further. One more place the truth needed to be logged. I dialed the sheriff's office, not to file charges, not yet, just to make sure that when this escalated, and I knew now that it would, there would be a record. "Hi," I said when the dispatcher answered. "I need to document a property boundary dispute, and I have evidence." There was a pause on the other end. "What kind of evidence?" she asked. I looked at the house again, at the stake, at the quiet that comes right before things break open. "Video," I said, "and a survey." She told me an incident number and wished me a good evening. I wrote it down. Then I sat back and listened to the wind move through the sage. Karen had crossed a line, not just on the ground, on record. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It hit me before the sun was fully up. A sour, rotting stench that didn't belong to the desert morning. I stepped outside and followed it toward the eastern fence line. 3 black trash bags sat near my shed, split open, contents spilling out onto the dirt. Fast food containers, old food scraps, broken glass, something sticky already attracting flies. It was deliberate. I didn't touch a thing. I went back inside, poured poured coffee I suddenly didn't want, and pulled up the camera footage. The timestamp read 2:37 a.m. A man in a hoodie walked onto my land carrying the bags. No gloves, no mask, nervous movements. He dumped the trash quickly, looked around once, then jogged back toward Sun Mesa. I zoomed in and caught his face. Clear enough. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. An email. Subject: urgent sanitation violation. It was from the HOA. According to the message, multiple residents had complained about unsanitary conditions on my property, visible refuse, health concerns, potential pest activity. They warned me that if the issue wasn't resolved immediately, they would contact the county health department. I stared at the screen. Bold moves are for people who assume no one is watching. I forwarded the footage to the sheriff's office and filed an incident report for illegal dumping and trespass. Then I forwarded it to my attorney. He called me back 10 minutes later. "This isn't HOA enforcement," he said. "This is harassment." That afternoon, another notice arrived. Not about trash, about my dog. According to the HOA, my dog was not an approved breed under community guidelines. They claimed complaints had been filed about noise and safety. They warned that animal control could be contacted if the issue persisted. My dog is old, quiet, sleeps more than I do. The implication was clear. They weren't trying to win anymore. They were trying to hurt. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside felt louder. Every shadow moved a little too much. The next morning, the sheriff called. "We picked him up," the deputy said. "Who?" I asked. "The guy who dumped the trash." The handyman didn't put up a fight. Minor record, cash job. He told them who paid him. I didn't need to ask. "Does she have short blonde hair and a talent for fake smiles?" I said. The deputy laughed once. "That's the one," he said. "He's cooperating." I hung up and sat there for a moment. This had crossed a line, not just legally, personally. By the end of the week, the story had spread. Neighbors across the ridge looked at me differently. One muttered something about community decay as I waved. Karen was controlling the narrative now. Emails went out to Sun Mesa residents describing me as hostile, uncooperative, a threat to neighborhood harmony. Someone forwarded one to me anonymously. It accused me of spreading misinformation and disrupting community cohesion. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so calculated. That's when I realized something else. Karen wasn't just reacting, she was spiraling. And people who spiral don't stop on their own. They escalate until someone makes them. I added another camera near the shed. Discreet, audio enabled. If she wanted to play games in the dark, I was done leaving the lights off. I didn't retaliate. I didn't respond publicly. I documented. Because by then, I wasn't just defending my land. I was documenting a pattern. And patterns are what courts understand. I stood on the porch that evening, my dog at my feet, watching the sun drop behind the hills. The orange stake still stood where Darren had driven it. Bright, defiant. Karen had ignored it. But she couldn't pretend it wasn't there anymore, not after this. Because once someone starts dumping trash and threatening animals, they have already lost the argument. They just don't know it yet. Things changed after the trash incident. Not all at once, not loudly, but they changed. The next HOA email didn't sound like Karen. The tone was softer, more careful. Words like confirmed violations quietly disappeared. They were replaced with alleged concerns. Deadlines became requests. Threats became reminders. That told me something. Someone had started asking questions. A few days later, my phone rang. "I'm calling unofficially," a man said. "I'm on the HOA board." He didn't give his last name. He didn't need to. "I didn't know about the trash," he said, "or the dog thing." I let the silence stretch. "She told us you were hostile," he continued. "A problem, armed, some kind of off-grid survivalist." I looked down at my dog sleeping at my feet. "I own a grill and a satellite dish," I said. "That's the extent of my militia." He exhaled. "That's not how she described you." That was the first crack. Over the next week, more appeared. An email from another board member asking, carefully, if the county had really approved the boundary changes. A text from someone else asking whether I'd be willing to share documentation. I shared nothing, not yet. Instead, my attorney sent a formal packet by certified mail. To the HOA, to Karen individually, to the county. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't dramatic, it was surgical. Survey results, drone imagery, county confirmations, the sheriff's incident number for illegal dumping. We alleged unlawful encroachment, unauthorized use of private land, targeted harassment, and we requested one thing: a halt. No more enforcement actions, no more notices, no more contact, until the boundary dispute was resolved legally. The response came quickly, a letter from the HOA's law firm, heavy paper, long paragraphs, confident tone. They accused me of misrepresentation, of damaging community harmony, of defaming a volunteer leader. They demanded I cease all public and private disparagement. My attorney read it once and smiled. Truth is an absolute defense, he said. They're bluffing. We replied with a single page, attached exhibits, screenshots, timestamps, and one sentence at the bottom. Please advise your client to preserve all records relevant to this matter. That sentence changes behavior, because once preservation is demanded, destruction becomes criminal. The next HOA meeting was tense. I didn't attend, but someone streamed it live. Karen sat at the head of the table, posture rigid. She spoke too much, interrupted often. Questions came from the room, about the boundary, about the permits, about the trash incident. She deflected, blamed misunderstandings, accused outside influences. Then someone asked about the orange steak. Karen called it provocative and an intimidation tactic. The room didn't agree. By the end of the meeting, 2 board members requested a closed session without her present. That night, the same man called me again. She didn't tell us everything, he said quietly. We're realizing that now. I thanked him and hung up. I didn't celebrate, because I knew what came next. When control starts slipping, people like Karen don't retreat. They double down. And when they double down, they make mistakes. I checked the new camera near the shed, scrolled forward. There she was again, this time with a contractor, standing right at the boundary, right where Darren had driven the neon orange survey stake. Karen pointed straight at it. Pull that orange stake out, she said, and move the pins back. The contractor hesitated. That's a survey marker, he said. We're not supposed to. Nobody measures twice, Karen snapped. Just do it. I'll handle him. That wasn't confusion. That wasn't interpretation. That was instruction. In this state, tampering with a survey marker isn't a gray area. It's a crime. The contractor shifted his weight, uncomfortable now. I don't want trouble, he said. Karen stepped closer. You won't have any, she said. Trust me. I saved the clip, labeled it, backed it up. Because at that moment, the story changed again. This wasn't just a land dispute. It wasn't even just fraud. This was someone attempting to physically destroy evidence. After being warned, after being documented, after the line had been made visible, I shut down the laptop and looked toward the eastern boundary. The orange stake was still there, bright, defiant, doing exactly what it was meant to do. Karen had tried to move the boundary with paper, then with threats, then with trash. Now she was trying to pull it out of the ground, and that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just losing control, she was desperate, and desperate people don't realize when they've just crossed the line that ends everything. I didn't go public out of anger. I went public because silence had stopped being neutral. Up until then, Karen controlled the story. Emails, meetings, whispers across fences. She was counting on confusion to do the work for her. So, I decided to change the lighting. I started small. No press releases, no social media rants, just facts. I put together a simple timeline. Dates, documents, images, my deed, the county plats, Darren's licensed survey, drone overlays, and finally, the footage. I didn't add commentary. I didn't add opinions. I let the evidence speak in its own voice. I sent the packet to 3 places: the county assessor, the planning department, and the sheriff's office. Then I waited. It didn't take long. The county called first. We need to review something, the clerk said. Your boundary appears unchanged. I told her I knew. The planning department followed. There's no record of an approved encroachment, the planner said, and that footage is concerning. That word mattered, concerning, because bureaucracies don't move on feelings. They move on liabilities. The sheriff's office was last. A deputy came out in person. He stood near the orange stake, hands on his belt, eyes moving from the house to the patio to the line in the dirt. "You've got a paper trail," he said, "and now you've got video." He took copies of everything. Then he asked a question I hadn't expected. "Has anyone asked you to move that marker?" I shook my head. "Because that would be a problem," he said. "A serious one." I watched him write notes and felt something shift. The ground wasn't just firm anymore, it was official. Meanwhile, the story inside Sun Mesa began to unravel. Someone leaked my packet to a neighborhood email list. I didn't authorize it, but I didn't stop it either. Within hours, the tone changed. Questions replaced accusations. Support replaced suspicion. People asked why a private HOA map didn't match the county's records. Why permits didn't reflect the current footprint. Why a board president would authorize construction so close to a disputed line. Karen responded the only way she knew how. She blamed contractors, clerks, former owners. She sent a long email about misunderstandings and bad actors. But she didn't address the footage. She couldn't. By the end of the week, the HOA's attorney sent another letter. This one was shorter, more cautious. They informed me the association would be temporarily suspending enforcement actions related to my property pending legal review. Translation: they were backing away. That same evening, someone knocked on my door. It was Felix, a board member I'd never met in person. He looked exhausted. "I didn't know," he said, before I even invited him in. She told us a different story. I poured him a glass of water and let him talk. "She said the boundaries were updated legally," he continued. "Said you were trying to extort the HOA. Said the stake was intimidation." He shook his head. "That footage," he said, "that changes everything." He left me a folder when he went. No return address. No note. Inside were internal emails, meeting minutes, and scanned maps with handwritten edits, some in Karen's handwriting. There was even a memo where she warned the board not to raise red flags about the expansion. I closed the folder and felt a strange calm settle in. This wasn't just my fight anymore. The board was fractured now. Some still defended her, others were quietly stepping away. Karen had lost the room. She just hadn't realized it yet. I stood on the porch later that night, listening to the wind move through the sage. The orange stake was still there, so was the house. But the ground under it felt different, less solid, like something that knew its days were numbered. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand columns, no dramatic echo, just wood, fluorescent lights, and the quiet weight of consequences. Karen sat at the defense table with her attorney, hands folded tight enough to turn her knuckles white. She wore a cross I'd never seen before. Her lawyer did most of the talking, long sentences, soft voice, careful words. He painted her as overwhelmed, a widow under strain, a volunteer leader who relied on professionals and made an honest mistake. He said misunderstanding a lot. My attorney stood and said very little. He didn't need to. He introduced the exhibits one by one, the deed, the county plats, the licensed survey, the drone overlays. Each document landed on the record with a quiet finality. Then came the footage. The judge leaned forward as the audio played. "He doesn't even know. Pull that orange stake out." "I'll handle him." Karen's lawyer objected. Too late. The judge didn't look at him. She looked at Karen. "Did you authorize construction beyond the recorded boundary?" the judge asked. Karen's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client relied on—" The judge raised a hand. "I asked your client," Karen swallowed. "I believe the boundary had changed," she said. The judge nodded once. "Did you file for a variance?" "No." "Did you obtain a recorded easement?" "No." "Did you instruct anyone to remove a survey marker?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Her attorney touched her arm. She shook him off. "Yes," she said, "but—" That was enough. The judge turned to my attorney. "Proceed." He did. He laid out the pattern. Paper manipulation, unauthorized construction, harassment, illegal dumping, and finally, attempted destruction of a survey marker. He didn't dramatize it. He let the timeline do the work. Karen tried to interrupt. She cried. She blamed contractors. She blamed former owners. She blamed stress. At one point, she turned and snapped at her lawyer. "You said this would go away." The courtroom went still. The judge removed her glasses. "Ms. Rigg," she said, "this court does not reward people who try to redraw reality." Then she read the order. Because the structure had been built based on fraudulent boundary representations, because no permits or easements authorized the encroachment, and because evidence showed deliberate attempts to conceal and destroy boundary markers, the court issued a demolition order, complete removal of all encroaching structures. Return of the land to its original condition within 30 days. Karen made a sound I'd never heard a human make before. Half gasp, half collapse. Her lawyer went pale. Demolition meant more than loss. It meant she would pay to destroy her own house, pay to haul it away, pay to restore the land, and still owe damages. The judge wasn't finished. She granted a preliminary injunction barring Karen from accessing any portion of my land, including the encroaching garage, patio, and sunroom. Karen leaned back, eyes unfocused. Then the judge looked at me. "Mr. Brody," she said, "you have the right to pursue damages." I nodded, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Outside the courtroom, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner. Karen's attorney pulled me aside. "Off the record," he said, voice low. "She can't afford demolition." I looked back at the building. "I know." That's when I made my move. I had already prepared an offer, a simple one. I would purchase the property at land value only, not the house, not the upgrades, not the illusion. In exchange, I would waive demolition enforcement and settle civil damages. One condition: Karen must sign a public statement acknowledging the boundary violation, and step down from any HOA leadership position permanently. No appeals, no spin. Her attorney read it twice. "This is generous," he said. "It's merciful," I replied. "Not generous." Karen refused at first. She said I was humiliating her. She said I was cruel. Then her lawyer explained the numbers: the cost of demolition, the loss of resale value, the likelihood of criminal charges if she touched that stake again. She went quiet. She signed the next morning, in court, hands shaking, no speech, no apology, just ink on paper. A week later, I held the keys. The house was mine. So was the land beneath it. I didn't keep the whole structure. I removed the encroaching sections cleanly: the patio, the illegal garage, the sunroom she used to call her executive lounge. What remained, I transformed, not out of spite, out of principle. I painted it in colors no HOA would ever approve: bold reds, deep greens, black trim. Inside, I turned the front room into a small exhibit: photos, maps, court orders, a timeline titled "How Not to Steal Land." I mounted the orange survey stake by the door, encased in glass. A plaque beneath it read, "This line did not move." Karen left town quietly. No farewell, no announcement, just an empty driveway and a sold sign. Peace returned slowly, like it always does out here, not with fireworks, with silence. And silence, I've learned, is the sound of things finally being where they belong. The quiet didn't come back all at once. It never does. At first, it showed up in small ways. No more emails, no certified envelopes, no cars slowing down near the fence line. The orange stake stayed where it was for a while, long enough for everyone to see it, long enough for the message to sink in. Then one morning, I pulled it out myself. Not because the line had moved, but because it didn't need to shout anymore. The land knew where it was. The house, what was left of it, stood quieter now too. Half of it was gone, the part that never belonged. The concrete cut clean, like a scar that finally healed right. I didn't rush the changes. I repainted slowly. Worked with my hands, let the place become something else. Not a trophy, not a warning, a reminder. Inside, people started stopping by. Neighbors, a couple of college kids. Someone's uncle who'd heard the story. I didn't advertise. I didn't charge at first. I just told them where the line used to be, and where it never should have moved. Eventually, I put up a small sign by the entrance. Private property. No HOA, no exceptions. Underneath it, in smaller letters, "This land is not your land." People laughed. Some took pictures. The sheriff stopped by one afternoon, leaned on the fence, and shook his head. Seen a lot of boundary disputes, he said. Never seen one end like this. I smiled. Most people don't check their ground, I said. Karen was gone by then. No forwarding address, no goodbye. Someone said she moved north. Someone else said she'd joined a condo board somewhere else. I didn't care. She wasn't my problem anymore. The HOA changed too. New president, new bylaws, a lot quieter. Felix waved when he drove past, didn't stop, didn't need to. That suited me fine. I settled back into a routine, mornings on the porch, coffee cooling faster than I could drink it, coyotes calling somewhere beyond the ridge. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking toward the eastern line out of habit. Then I'd remember. There was nothing left to watch. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't even about Karen. It was about something older than all of that. Ownership. Not the loud kind, not the kind that needs permission slips and newsletters. The quiet kind. The kind written down once, checked twice, and respected whether you're standing there or not. I'd spent years in my career watching people argue over inches they never bothered to measure, watching confidence try to replace fact, watching authority pretend it was the same thing as truth. This time, the ground pushed back. Because land doesn't care about titles, or tone, or who talks the loudest in a meeting. It remembers. The lines don't lie. People do. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, I walked the perimeter one last time. The oak tree still leaned east. The fence post still stood crooked. The dirt still felt the same under my boots. I stopped where the patio used to be, ran my hand through the soil. Nothing special about it. That was the point. I went back to the porch, sat down, and listened to the wind move through the sage. No drama, no threats. No letters waiting in the mailbox, just space. The kind you buy when you want to be left alone. I took a sip of my drink and smiled to myself. If you're going to build on someone else's land, I muttered, you'd better bring more than confidence. The wind rattled the sign once, almost like it agreed.